His village burns. Warriors on horseback, swinging their swords. Axes split skulls, slaughtering, butchering. His father fighting outside. His mother preparing something on the small wooden table. The screams rise to a crescendo. He stares at his mother. No concern, no panic, no fear. Her face is hard and determined as she prepares a thick black elixir that she says will help them sleep through the madness. She is their strength. She is his strength. He has never seen her in this way, and he feels safe despite the chaos and carnage outside their small thatched home. His mother hands his brothers and sister small cups of the elixir. She turns to Tarhos with a reassuring nod. She helps him drink his share and tells him everything will be as it is supposed to be. Bitter and thick, the elixir oozes down his throat as the cries and screams and clangs rise and fall outside. Then he feels it. The numbness spreads from his lips to his feet. Faces blur, sounds fade, and an inky blackness spreads over his eyes as he falls asleep in his mother's warm embrace. Then there is silence. When he wakes up again, he finds himself crushed under the weight of mangled and mutilated bodies. Sightless eyes, slashed throats, strange sounds all around him. Horses neighing, children crying, knights laughing and making merry. Young Tarhos stares at a ghastly face pushing up against his. He shifts slightly and narrows his eyes. The blurred features suddenly reveal his uncle, eyes wide and scared, mouth caught in a death scream. Tarhos knows he should be scared. He knows he should feel sad, but he doesn't. And he knows he should feel guilty for not feeling sad, but he doesn't. What he feels he doesn't understand or cannot put to words. He just stares at the horror before him without flinching. A hand suddenly grips his arm and pulls him out of the pit, and as he's carried away, he stares at his burning village in wonder as a high-pitched whine fills his ears. Decked in armor, Tarhos travels on horseback through the mountains into Portugal. The lord he serves believes a relic, the lapis paradissus stone, is buried deep in the catacombs beneath the city of Sintra. Lord Toscano claims he isn't after riches, but hope. Hope that this stone can lead him to another world that holds knowledge that can save this one. He prays that this lost knowledge of the ancient guardians might bring peace, harmony, and order to a world plagued by cruelty, violence, and imbalance. Tarhos scoffs at the idea of a world without violence. Life is violence, from birth to death, and everything in between is a futile attempt by cowards to hide from the horror that is living. The only plague in this world are the lies, the unnatural codes and laws created by nobles and lords for their mutual benefit. Unnatural laws and codes and books that deny the truth of the world by trying to make it something it's not. Tarhos believes something else. It's all good or none of it is. It's all evil or none of it is. It's all part of the same cosmic mud, the mystery that transcends the world and all its dualities. A mystery he never pretended to understand, but affirmed all his life with his sword and his disdain of those who used their laws to make their slaughter pious. Hypocrites, all of them. Not him. There's no guilt, no shame, and no need to hide from life. Now Toscano halts before a village and sees guards protecting the entrance of the catacombs. He sighs deeply and shakes his head. He has no wish to shed the blood of innocence, and turning his horse around, commands Tarhos to find another way. Find another way. Disgust strikes him like a sword. He feels the blade pierce his chest, smacking the breath from his lungs. He has no words for this order. All he can do is stare defiantly. Find another way. Why? So Toscano can sleep at night? So he can waste more of his time with his foolish notions of right and wrong, of good and evil, of noble and barbaric? Toscano's entire fortune was secured with violence and slaughter justified by highly imaginative codes and laws. His fortune was secured with nothing but darkness. Tarhos grinds his teeth as disgust darkens toward hate. And he feels something else. He feels Toscano doesn't deserve the spoils of his ancestors, or his relics, or this ancient stone that will somehow open a gateway to a world untainted by violence. He's a fool if he believes such a thing. No such place exists. And if such a place did exist, he would want nothing to do with it. He sighs and scrunches his fist. He wants to crush him like a maggot. Of all the lords he's served, this one he hates the most. He's heard enough of his notions of ancient guardians and their supposed superior wisdom. And as he watches Toscano ride away with his retinue, he decides he'll take it all. He'll take it all because he can. He'll take his stone and his relics and his town, and he'll show this bloody coward the truth of the world, the truth that has always lived in his heart, and no one will stop him. Not the guards in the village, and certainly not the 3 knights Toscano left behind. Without hesitation, Tarhos dismounts his horse and unsheaths his sword with a terrible ring. As the sun begins its slow descent, Tarhos battles the 3 knights. They attack as one, and as one, they fall to his bloody sword. A knight refuses to die and stands with a right arm dangling by sinews of flesh. He grips his bloody sword with his left hand and attacks. Tarhos evades and plunges his sword through the metal mesh and into his chest. The knight catches his breath, crouches to his knees, mumbles some death-fearing words, then slumps down in the dirt. Then Tarhos turns toward the village, where he feels the eyes of a dozen guards on him. They watch him from the shadows as Tarhos marches toward the ancient catacombs of Sintra. The guards stand outside the ancient door, strapping young men with crude swords. Tarhos sees the fear in their eyes as they raise their torches to see who dares challenge them. At 6'6", Tarhos knows he presents an imposing figure. He commands them to clear the way, but the guards draw their weapons, and Tarhos feels a darkness crawling out of his heart and into his veins. He grips his sword tightly as guards close in on him from every direction. He glances around, unafraid. Then one guard shouts some nonsense about honor and things that are sacred, and they scream their anger and attack in unison. Time slows to a crawl as Tarhos fights through the guards. His sword gleams in constant motion under the setting sun, whirling to sever limbs, smash backs, and slice necks. The guards shout and leap with a burning need to protect the dead. Tarhos burns with a stronger fire to affirm life in all its pain, agony, and horror. The last standing guard runs for his life, screaming for mercy. Tarhos strikes him down and turns to the ancient wooden door with a wicked smile. He wipes the blood off his blade, then picks up one of the fallen torches and steps into the darkness. Death surrounds him, fills his nostrils. Not the decomposing flesh of those buried over the centuries, but the rotting bodies of the rodents and vermin that called this necropolis home. His torch illuminates ancient walls constructed of stone and skulls and bones arranged in oddly ornate displays. He feels the presence of countless lost and terrified souls. Cowards, all of them. He finds one skeleton impaled on a spear that sprang from the wall, a trap the ancients set to prevent treasure seekers from finding the stone. He finds the remains of other dead adventurers, in pits filled with spikes, crushed by boulders, torn in half by swinging blades. He feels a presence guiding him, dark, cold, primal. A paving stone clicks as he steps on it, and a razor-sharp scythe springs from the wall in a deadly arc. He drops to his knees, the blade whistling above, the deadly edge nearly decapitating him. Tarhos uses his torch to burn spiderwebs. The sticky strands cling to him as he pushes forward. Massive spiders, furry and thick, scramble over his armor, searching for flesh. He brushes them off with his torch, setting them ablaze. In another cavern, he startles a giant cauldron of bats. They screech and flap, slamming into Tarhos as they make their chaotic escape, nearly knocking him off his feet. Sweat burns his eyes, and he blinks it away as he forges ahead. A trapdoor drops beneath his feet, and Tarhos falls, grabs the edge, barely holds on. With the full weight of his armor weighing him down, he uses every ounce of strength to lift himself to safety. Finally, he finds himself on a narrow path to an ancient and ornate sepulchre. He strains and pushes to move the ledger stone that covers it. Inside, he finds the skeleton of an ancient warrior in his armor. The metal is tarnished, not rusted, and a large stone talisman lays against the warrior's breastplate, the lapis paradissus. Tarhos retraces his steps as his torch dims and dies, plunging him into darkness. He feels his way ahead, past the same deadly obstacles, avoiding the pits, avoiding the blades. Countless spiders skitter over his armor, probing for a way inside. He detects a tiny glimmer of light that gradually grows until finally he emerges from the catacombs. With renewed vigor, he contends with a few surviving guards as he passes through the village, finds his horse, and sets off into the dark. Upon returning to camp, Tarhos finds dozens of warriors and knights waiting to make him pay for his dishonor. They attack with a terrible scream. Tarhos evades death blows and senses his fatigue, and he knows they are beyond his strength to defeat. But Tarhos also knows it's not his strength defeating them, nor is it his skill. He's only a vessel for the darkness, and the darkness, shaped by his skill and size, fights through him, dispensing heads, limbs, and torsos like something inspired, like something divine. Toscano wades into the mayhem and screams for the violence to stop. Tarhos holds the talisman high, and Toscano's eyes grow wide as they take in the arcane symbols. If you want it, you must take it. Bend your knee, or face my sword. At once, Toscano orders his men to put down their swords, refusing to be the cause of more slaughter. They all bend their knees and bow their heads, and Tarhos takes Toscano prisoner. Tarhos enters the dungeon and looms above Toscano, who sits cross-legged on the ground, surrounded by decomposing limbs and heads and an infestation of maggots. Toscano looks up at Tarhos. Then his troubled eyes lower to a dripping basket in his hands. Tarhos kneels before Toscano and opens the basket as though he were about to share bread and wine with him. But instead of food and drink, he pulls out a head, examines it, and asks his name. Cavalieri. Tarhos places the head in a pile of festering heads so that the wide eyes are staring at Toscano. Then he pulls out another severed head. Arno. He was a coward, you should have heard him beg. Tarhos pulls out two other gory heads and places them so that they all stare at their lord with wide, terrified eyes. He then pulls out the lost head and holds it in the dancing torchlight. I liked him. He didn't beg. I think I'll keep this one. Tarhos places the head back into the basket. He stares at Toscano for a long moment, then stands and exits the dungeon, leaving Toscano with a few more heads to keep him company and perhaps to help him remember where he hid his secret books and relics. Books and relics rumored to have been salvaged from another world, a world described as perfect. And to Tarhos, this could only mean a world without all the lies and pretenses of civilization. Tarhos approaches the dungeon door, but doesn't open it. Through a small opening, he stares at Toscano, lying on the ground with the maggots. A thick wall of flies makes it difficult to see. I would have thought you would have crushed the maggots by now rather than live with them. Toscano's eyelids open slowly, but he doesn't respond. The nobles are preparing to attack me. And why? Because I am doing what they do, only without the lies. They say I am mad. Tarhos scoffs. Do I seem mad to you? Life is madness, and I accept it for what it is. So perhaps in that way, I am mad. Tarhos opens the door, enters slowly, and crushes several maggots as he paces around the small dungeon. I remember a village we destroyed because a man had stolen food from a noble. The entire village in ruins and everyone hacked to pieces because of a few stolen apples. So much suffering and death because of one man's hunger and another man's ego. That's the history of the world, right there. Tarhos fixes his gaze on Toscano, who says nothing. I didn't mind the killing, but I did mind the praise and honors we were given for our just and pious deeds. That kind of talk is true madness. Tarhos pushes through a cloud of flies and approaches Toscano. He stares at the symbols scratched into the floor and laughs to himself. Tarhos enters the dungeon and squats beside Toscano, handing him a wooden vessel of warm water. He watches his prisoner drink it down, then smiles at the growing collection of symbols on the ground. You should see what I've done with the town. I've made similar symbols with cadavers, and I've recently added old rivals to my rather impressive displays. I also have old friends helping me prepare to battle a small army closing in on us from every direction. A righteous army here to put an end to my evil. Tarhos breathes in the stench of rotting humanity. But something tells me they aren't coming for me. From what I've heard, a few nobles desire what you've been hiding from me. Which makes me wonder, what exactly have you been hiding from me? I offered the nobles the stone, but that didn't seem to interest them in the least. What makes this knowledge you have hidden from us so special? Tarhos wipes away a pile of maggots from the floor to reveal a symbol. Not this knowledge of a perfect world. Tarhos scoffs. What you don't understand in all your wisdom is that the world is perfect as it is. It is. And if you don't get it here and now, it doesn't matter where you end up or what knowledge you find. You will always be looking for something more. Tarhos stares at Toscano for a long, pensive moment. Paradise will come when you make peace with life as it is and not the way you imagine it should be. When you embrace the horror instead of running from it. Only when you can do this will you see the madness of your ways. Your futile search for knowledge, your foolish refusal to take a life, even the life of a groveling maggot. Tarhos pounds a fist and crushes several maggots into a squirming white paste. Then he picks the splattered pieces off his hand, stares at them curiously, and flicks them into the gaping mouth of a severed head. He stares at the head, remembering. There was a village, quite far from here. A small army advanced on this village on a mission, I suppose, to butcher the barbarians, to make this world a better place. Rather than be killed by a stranger or be taken as a slave, these villagers had chosen to die by their own accord. Tarhos scoops a few more maggots and tosses them into the mouth. I remember one mother had poisoned her family, without hesitation or remorse. The love and strength of will it must have taken to do that. Something I've yet to see in all my experiences on the battlefield and off. I have been around nobles and knights my whole life, and all I've seen is cowardice steeped in the rotten stew of lies and hypocrisy. Tarhos tosses one last maggot into the festering mouth, stands upright, walks through a thick cloud of flies, and pauses in the torchlit doorway. I have yet to meet her equal. Then he shuts the door with a clang, leaving Toscano in the growing darkness.